Welcome to episode 135 of the G2 on 5G. It's the latest inside scoop on everything 5G. We typically cover 6 topics in 20 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. But this week, Anshel and I are going to do a special episode with our expectations for Mobile World Congress 2023. So you and I will both be there next week. There's been a lot of pre-announcement activity that's been going on over the last 2 weeks. So that sort of sets the precedent or the foundation for our podcast this week. But one of my big expectations is about network slicing. And so recently, Cradlepoint and Ericsson announced a proof of concept where they demonstrated network slicing with respect to application deployment in distributed environments. And I spoke with executives recently. This is a very complicated endeavor, mapping applications to slices, especially in distributed environments with SD-WAN. And I'm expecting to hear a lot more about this from Ericsson and Cradlepoint, but from other infrastructure providers as well. So I'm wondering, what's your take on all that?
Yeah, I think I definitely have a little bit more of like a device-centric slant. Um, for me, it feels like there's going to be a lot of Chinese OEMs at the show
Mm-hmm.
announcing their European and global launches of their devices. In the last few years, there's been a trend of Chinese OEMs launching devices in December and January ahead of the Chinese New Year, and then announcing their global and European launches for the rest of the world at MWC. So you're getting Xiaomi, you're getting Oppo, you're getting Honor, you're getting OnePlus. You're getting all of the big Chinese OEMs showing what they've launched over the last month or two,
Mm-hmm.
and generally announcing their availability for the rest of the world and Europe.
Yeah.
That said, not all of these launches are going to be targeted towards the US. In fact, I would say most of them are not.
Right.
Most of them are targeted towards Europe. Uh, and MWC being a European show, that makes perfect sense.
Yep.
And us Americans will get to, you know, get excited about devices that we may not get, which has been quite a sad phase of what's going on in our industry.
Mm-hmm.
But there are going to be some technologies that will find their way in the US, like Nubia, ZTE working together with a company called Leia to make a 3D tablet with a tablet with a 3D display, but also 3D camera, so you can capture and view videos in 3D, and it looks really incredible, at least from what I've heard. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll be checking that out, and I will actually be reviewing that. So hopefully, I'll be able to show the US version of that, which will not be a ZTE product. But Nubia will also be showing their AR glasses. So there's
Yeah.
a lot going on the consumer side, a lot of devices, lots of demos from Qualcomm and MediaTek. Um, you know, I have a lot of things to do and see at the show,
Yeah.
and you and I will almost never see each other during that entire duration.
You're right. Yeah, like, I'll be focused on the infrastructure, players, and you get the cool stuff, you get the devices and, the AR, VR and all of that. And certainly, it's, what's fun about this event is just, being able to like walk the Fira, be able to like meet these companies and, see these demos and that sort of thing. It's going to be super exciting from my perspective. But we've seen some announcements from MediaTek and Qualcomm, right, recently leading up to the show. And like, this is a strategy, from a lot of these vendors where they'll pre-announce before the show to kind of build momentum. And then there may be some follow-on announcements at Mobile World Congress next week when you and I are both there. But do you have any like feedback on some of the pre-briefings? Like a lot of the stuff's under embargo obviously, but is there anything that you can share from like an end device perspective that you've been pre-briefed on that maybe the embargo's already lifted?
Yeah, so today Qualcomm announced that Stable Diffusion, which is a very popular AI application for image generation,
Mhm.
using text descriptions. They have that now running on smartphone. So it doesn't need to send that data to the cloud and receive it back. Um, they're able to run this entirely on the smartphone and
Yeah.
do it, within seconds, as opposed to minutes or hours. So the performance is very similar to what you would get on the cloud, but using your own device and your own performance. And that's a big deal because it shows the performance that Qualcomm is able to achieve on device, and enable developers to offload a lot of that today's cloud AI rendering and inference, to the device side, which
Mhm.
improves security, privacy, and can potentially improve speed as AI acceleration improves and the models get optimized. In addition to that, Qualcomm also announced an IoT platform called Qualcomm Aware, and that's their IoT application for industrial IoT, and it's a complete solution for connectivity, services, APIs, the whole shtick. It's like it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Um, and then MediaTek also just announced, it'll actually go live when we publish this, that they are going to have, that they've announced an actual chipset that will be powering all of the satellite 5G that they have.
Mhm.
So it's actually, it has a name. It's the MT6825, and it's actually a standalone chip specifically for satellite communications. So it's like something that you can just add on to any SoC.
Mhm.
Obviously, it would most likely be a MediaTek SoC, but that's not exclusive.
Right.
Um, and it's interesting because it's not necessarily the same approach as other companies are taking, as opposed to having it integrated into the modem,
Yeah.
but it's also 3GPP and TN release 17 compliant. So it's actually more, universally applicable to what the future of 5G satellite will be than some of these proprietary applications.
Right.
And I think they will also be demonstrating that with their partner Bullet, who will have both the Motorola Defy 2 as well as the Cat phone. I forget, I think it's S75 or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, but it's interesting because they will be able to also show this hotspot that you can Bluetooth to an iOS or an Android device that will give you satellite two-way messaging, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else offers that today,
Mhm.
but it's an interesting thing, and I will definitely be checking that out at the show. And then on top of that, MediaTek also announced a new SoC, which is the Dimensity 7200. So they've been kind of you know tossing announcements out there just like Qualcomm.
Yeah.
The Dimensity 7200 is interesting because it's a new tier of SoC that they haven't had before. They have the 9000 series at the top, then they have the 8000 below that, and then there was the 1000 series, which was like the old naming scheme they had. So now
Yeah.
they're adding the 7000 series, which will kind of sit between the 1000 and the 8000, but it still uses all of the latest cores from ARM and the latest TSMC 4 nanometer second generation fabrication process. So it should
Yeah.
be very power efficient, and be very popular for mid tier devices.
I'm super impressed. MediaTek really over the last year, they've really sort of filled out their product roadmap. And they were always sort of the value player to Qualcomm, but like now they've got mid-range and higher end solutions. And they're really giving Qualcomm a run for their money. So, and it's good, like I always talk about this, competition breeds innovation. And so I think it's a good thing for the industry. But with that said, my next expectation really is around private cellular. And there's been a lot of, hype around this and like how, private cellular, with, its ultra low latency, especially with 5G, can really do some things that are very disruptive relative to Wi-Fi when you look at manufacturing automation, tactile robotic, control and that sort of thing. And this week, Cellular announced that it is expanding its footprint. It's been really primarily a US player, and now it's going global. So I spoke with the CEO recently, and they're hiring sales staff, they're building a channel to really expand into Europe and really sort of take their private 5G in a box global. And I think it's a wise strategy. I mean, there are lots of routes to private cellular networking. I've talked about that on prior podcasts, but I really do think another big theme, we talked about network slicing earlier, but another big theme from an infrastructure perspective will be around private cellular. I'm expecting to hear some new news from Nokia as well as they're maturing their portfolio, and certainly Cisco. I'm expecting, I can't really talk about it right now, but although the embargo may break when this podcast posts, but there will be a strategic announcement with a company that many people are familiar with on expanding Cisco's presence within private networking. But would love to get your insights and thoughts and maybe what the connection is to what you focus on with AR, VR, and end devices.
Yeah, I'm really interested in what the I think we talked about this a couple podcasts ago, but we haven't actually had a chance to see it because it's not, MWC yet. But I'm really excited to see that Ericsson, Intel, Microsoft partnership on standalone 5G with a PC
Yeah,
using network slicing, because I think that's kind of like the application that brings together all of the possible components and creates a solution that
yeah,
I believe will be a huge boost to 5G adoption and
yeah,
increase its use within the enterprise. Because truthfully, I think a lot of consumers are fairly justified in their lack of interest in 5G, because realistically, to up to today, most consumers aren't really seeing that much of a difference in their experience as a cellular user, right? The applications haven't changed.
right.
They're marginally faster, and in some places they're slower because of the transition to mid-band for some carriers. So I think that there will be a big change in the way 5G is perceived. I'm
Mhm.
not sure if that'll happen on the consumer side right away, but if
Yeah,
if we do see this network slicing application really take hold with standalone networks finally becoming a thing,
yeah,
um, I really believe that this one could be a great application for us to see in person, experience it. Because I personally have an optimal network solution at home. I'm getting 3 milliseconds over Wi-Fi, you know, gigabit per second in each direction, but
hmm,
that's very difficult to achieve outside of a very controlled environment. And guess
yeah,
what? Even I have challenges, because yesterday I was trying to stream. Well, I was trying to download all of my PSVR 2 titles to my PS5
hmm,
while I was doing a virtual VR conference, and I had issues with interference. So, not there's a lot more work that needs to be done with QoS and enabling better Wi-Fi and cellular interactions. And I believe that private networking and network slicing is going to be, the the key that unlocks a lot of potential.
I agree. And it's a journey. You and I talk about this all the time. I mean, the 5G deployment, it's a journey, and the mobile network operators have probably, gotten ahead of the hype cycle, and people are asking themselves like what's really transformative. But really, the true promise of 5G gets unlocked with standalone. That's marrying the core 5G infrastructure with 5G RAN and network slicing. To your point, quality of service and business environments, but also things like guaranteed, latency levels for cloud gaming, mobile gaming, and that sort of thing. And it's a journey. In the US, T-Mobile's been first, to SA in their low band, but they're focused on their mid-band build out. And as we've talked about also on prior podcasts, mid-band is the best balance of performance and propagation. It's going to take time. And AT&T and Verizon are not too far behind with C-band and Andromeda, build outs. And I think Vodafone is clearly a leader in Europe with building, getting closer to standalone. But I mean, we started this journey. How many years ago has it been, man? It's almost 5 years now, right?
I
you know,
mean, it depends how you count it, but I would say from first 5G network deployment in 2019 to today, we
For
are
you.
almost at 4 years.
Yeah.
So it's been a
Yeah.
while.
It's been a while, so it's a journey, and we've got another 6 or 7 years because these Gs tend to be about a decade in duration. So, but yeah, I'm super excited to see all this come together. And the other thing that I'm really excited about this Mobile World Congress is that last year you and I were there with our chief analyst Patrick Moorhead. It was well attended, but not at the levels that it's been in the past. I really do think 2023 will be the year where we're past COVID, we're past having to provide vaccination cards and that sort of thing. And I'm really expecting there to be, great momentum there. People are going to show up, and it's going to be super exciting. So, but with that said, sort of my third thought around my expectation around Mobile World Congress will be, and I'm going to caveat this because artificial intelligence, I mean, there's a lot of whitewashing going on there. Everyone claims that it's one of these very esoteric concepts like the cloud for some people. But, I think the promise of artificial intelligence is in the ability for it to do intelligent things from an automation perspective. And these new 5G networks are going to require automation for fast provisioning. And we're already seeing some of this happen with Apple and, Apple moving to eSIM on the iPhone in the US. And I think that will become a pervasive extension globally, but it comes down to intelligent automation. And, and we've talked about 6G in the past and how AI may be a part of that. But what I'm really expecting to see are some, very tangible demonstrations of how machine learning and artificial intelligence can really power automation to do some pretty powerful things when you start talking about 5G as a service. So Cisco has talked about their solution. There will be announcements at Mobile World Congress where Cisco will be enhancing their portfolio. AWS, Azure, they have 5G as a service solutions as well. And AI is going to be a big part of that. So one of my big expectations is I'm hoping to see some real practical applications of machine learning and AI with respect to the infrastructure layer. But I'm gonna toss it back to you because you're our in-device expert and our VR AR expert. Where do you think AI infused with 5G can really change the user experience from kind of that end-device perspective?
I will answer your question after I say that you reminded me that T-Mobile and Amazon, AWS, announced that they were going to work together on 5G advanced network solutions.
That's right.
That was
I'm glad you mentioned that because I tweeted that out earlier this week. So thank you for
that
mentioning.
was 2 days ago, and that's basically deploying AWS solutions for T-Mobile's private 5G application. So I think T-Mobile might be the first one to take AWS solution for this application.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting because AWS is kind of considered the leader in this space, and they have a lot of experience on the edge. So I think there's a really big uplift that T-Mobile gets by partnering with AWS in this,
Right.
and I think it's going to be interesting to see how that works itself out over the course of the year, because I think we both agreed that T-Mobile's edge capabilities were a bit weak
Yes.
when it comes to 5G, private and non-private applications. So I think that partnering with Amazon is a big deal. And we'll probably see some of that at the show. I know Neville will be speaking at the Deutsche Telekom booth. I'm not sure if I'll be able to make it because I'm double booked during that slot. But hopefully I'll at least be able to say hi. I think we might even have a separate meeting with Neville on it privately.
We did.
But yeah, I think on your question that you asked me, it's really interesting because I've been watching AI infuse itself into the VR and AR space for quite some time now. Most of the hand tracking and location mapping and a lot of the object detection, that's all AI accelerated, and it actually has been for years. So it's really funny because now people are paying way more attention to AI, but the reality is, AI had to be implemented years ago for it to work right. And those algorithms are getting better over time. They're becoming more power efficient. The hardware is becoming more fixed function for those
Yeah.
capabilities. So actually, there's a couple generations of Qualcomm's AR, XR, VR hardware that goes into headsets. The majority of headsets use their chipsets, and most of those headsets have these fixed function capabilities for AI built into the ISP, built into the GPU. So there's a lot of AI acceleration already built into the hardware for a lot of these devices, and most of
Mhm.
it's being used for vision applications
Yeah.
because that's where they have a lot of experience. But I will say, and we've heard this with the X75, and I think we're going to continue to see it with MediaTek. They have some demos at MWC that they'll be showing.
Yeah.
AI accelerated 5G modems.
Yeah.
Qualcomm said that their modem is going to be 2.5 times faster for inference. And I mean, people don't really fully comprehend. The modem has its own tensor cores, its own ability to do inference, separate from the GPU, separate from the ISP, separate from the DSP.
Right.
So you have AI already actively kind of coexisting along with the 5G capabilities, but now we're going to start seeing on-device AI and then infrastructure side AI, and then those talking to each other to improve signal, battery life, and you know performance. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of AI that's getting infused, and I saw a lot of that from a lot of companies, and it'll be really interesting to see you know what Qualcomm will be demoing as well as MediaTek at the show, specifically with AI and 5G.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned X75. That's a Qualcomm solution that we've talked about on a prior podcast. But yeah, I mean it's exciting. And to your point, this has been, AI has been maturing. It requires huge data sets to train the models and that sort of thing. So one of my, sniff tests when I talk to an infrastructure provider that claims that they have the best AI algorithm, I always ask them, how big is that data lake? And there are only a few infrastructure providers that really have massive data lakes, like the Ciscos and the Arubas of the world. But I mean, truly, from my perspective, the demonstrable impact of AI on infrastructure will be around self-healing and quality of service and that sort of thing. And like you mentioned, that ripples down to device performance as well. And I will mention Huawei for a moment. They have been a leader in the past in integrating AI into a lot of their SoCs and their chipsets on the phone level to do. I mean, it's really basic things like their mate products where they were able to sort of determine as a user, were you more sort of email client intensive or were you more browser intensive, and adjust the performance accordingly. So I mean, I'm going to toss that out there to you. Do you see any other phone manufacturers like Samsung or Apple going in that direction?
I mean, the way I look at it is everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
Um, I think there's varying degrees of AI. I think Google is kind of way out and far ahead of everybody on their implementation of AI.
Yeah.
I think Qualcomm is doing a lot to try and enable their OEMs to do more, but especially in hardware with APIs and stuff like that. But I
Yeah.
think Google's by far and away ahead of everyone in their capabilities, and I think you'll see more and more companies taking advantage of the hardware capabilities, especially this year.
Yeah.
Actually, this was something that I said would be a trend at CES. So I was a little early, but you know, I have a lot of visibility into a lot of different companies, and I've had the experience to know that like when something is starting, and the AI trend is really becoming something tangible because the hardware and the APIs are there. But I would say, Samsung has tried for many years to make Bixby, an assistant and have an intelligent AI existing on your smartphone. But if you look at what's going on in like all of these smartphone cameras, every camera uses AI. There isn't a smartphone camera out there that doesn't use AI,
Right.
whether it's for photo or video. That's kind of a standard thing. That's actually been going on for years. It's
Yeah.
just it's very lightly marketed, but I'm sure that marketing will get pushed forward as far as possible because if they don't have an AI story outside of voice recognition and camera, that's what they're going to push as their AI story. But I think
Yeah.
there's a lot more that can be done with device intelligence and kind of anticipating the user's needs, making sure that they have the best user experience catered to their needs.
Yeah. I agree. Very well said, my friend. Well, it's been a different podcast this week, but we decided to try something different. I think it's been a really engaging conversation. But for our viewers and listeners, tune in next week because Anshel and I will be at Mobile World Congress in beautiful Barcelona, sharing our live tweets and our insights. But with that said, my friend, why don't you take us home?
Absolutely. We hope our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone would like to provide insights for a specific 5G topic for a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at Whaletown Tech, and I'm at Anshel. We hope you have a great weekend, and please tune in again next week where we'll be coming to you from Barcelona. And don't forget to rate us and subscribe as well. Thank you.